The show is a presentation of about 11 video installations of mine that I've made over the last 15 or so years, all condensed into the space of ACCA, and that means sometimes they're layered on top of one another or squeezed in together or programmed one after the other. Even though there's a sort of cacophony of different works, all very densely packed together, there's certain characteristics that I think form almost as patterns across the experience. So you have the idea of the front of a screen, the back of a screen, the idea of something that's on, something that's off. You have the idea of, as I say, of echoing or paralleling. I've made lots of references to Beckett over the years. I'm interested in Beckett. He's a fellow Dubliner by birth, and I just think he's a very interesting figure in terms of the history of 20th century theatre and culture more broadly. In this instance, I've taken his description of the mise-en-scène of his play Krapp's Last Tape. I've borrowed it in a way as a mise-en-scène for the exhibition. Krapp's Last Tape stages an encounter between a male protagonist, an older man, and a tape recorder. He plays back recordings that he made in his earlier life and sort of re-encounters a sort of earlier version of himself. So I thought that was a sort of interesting kind of filter or interesting pretext for the exhibition. I don't come from a theatre background. I'm very much embedded in like the visual art kind of scene, and I very much see my historical context as visual art. So that's kind of clear. And at the same time, I'm interested in boundaries and I'm interested in crossovers. And there's lots of ways in which theatre has felt useful to me as a reference point in the realization of work. So I think the qualities that I would sort of identify within theatre are the fact that it's kind of got a certain ritualistic or kind of archaic quality, going right back to sort of Greek tragedies and even before that. I also really appreciate the fact that it's very contingent. It happens in the here and now. And I think that those particular traits have always been useful for me in the context of visual art. I really enjoy the gallery space. I think it's a great piece of architecture and it's quite hardcore as a building, and I really appreciate that. So in a way that seems to already provoke a lot of creative thinking. And then the interior is windowless and kind of relentless, and that's, you know, great, I think. And so for me, I've treated the interior as like being inside a machine. I mean, the metaphor I'm using, because it's a video show, I've been using this kind of metaphor that it's like being inside a VCR. As an artist, I've had to thread a line between, on the one hand, retaining the integrity of individual works, and at the same time, making the kind of combination of all the works work as a whole. And sometimes there's very kind of acute, particular moments in that kind of decision-making process. There is a kind of a risk-taking element or an experimental dimension to this exhibition, and it's slightly kind of, yeah, it does take some risks with the work. I think if somebody else was doing this show of my work, I might struggle with the risks that are being taken. But in this instance, because I'm the one who's sort of making the choices and taking the risks, I'm backing myself. What I hope is that people will approach it with a certain kind of sincerity of commitment. You have to give the show 45 minutes or an hour. It's not instant gratification. It was never set up to be that. It's going to be as rewarding as you allow it to be.